Partner reading to improve reading comprehension. Hi there, I'm Heather Van Struen. I am Ed Tech and Curriculum Consultant with Elk Island Catholic Schools. I've been teaching for 12 years. I live with my husband Simon, my daughter Matilda, and my dog Frodo Barkins. And I love to read, and my favorite books are Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing and Miss Nelson is Missing. So today we're going to look at the area of challenge and the intervention that was implemented. We'll look at the effectiveness of that intervention, so what were the results. We'll reflect and look at what worked and what didn't, and the learning that took place for me, and then we'll put it all together. So to start off, the struggle is real. I actually didn't have a class since I'm a consultant. I'm out of the class at the moment. And so a big shout out to Ashley, who we worked together on looking at what her students would need, what would support them. And she shared her data with me. We did change the students' names, so I have no idea exactly the specific students that we were looking at. But yeah, thanks, Ashley. So to start off, let's look at the level of focus in the area of challenge. This class is actually a 5-6 split, but we were looking more specifically at the grade 5s. And the identified problem is reading comprehension. And this came out through Ashley's practice, as well as her results from a Fontes and Pinnell benchmarking assessment system and the Lexile levels that it showed for reading comprehension. It is, we were looking for a tier 1 level of focus, something to support the whole class. And this is based on the response to intervention. So again, like I said, the tier 1, we were looking more at just a whole group approach. The idea, though, is we are going to support some of those struggling students who have a lower Lexile level. So the class, according to the benchmark assessment system, or BAS, has a Lexile range of 400 Lexiles to 1,175 Lexiles. And ideally, all students would have a Lexile level of 625 Lexiles to 950 Lexiles. And I actually was focusing on 3 students that were selected at random. As well, I was also just going to look at the whole class results and see if our intervention was successful for the whole group as well as those 3 students. So, as mentioned, the goal for a grade 5 student would be to have a Lexile level between 625 Lexiles to 950. This is taken from the Action Potential Learning Guide that correlates Lexile levels, Fontes and Pinnell levels, and the ATOS book level. And in consultation with Ashley, we decided that for each student and the class, the idea would be to increase the Lexile level by 25 Lexiles, just because of the timing of the year and just the short implementation of everything. So the class, according to our pre-test Lexile, which we used the assessment tool from Read Theory, the initial results were that the class had a Lexile level of 150 to 1050, and the goal then was to increase that to 175 with a high level of 1075. The 3 students that I followed, their Lexile levels were, for Chris, was 150 Lexiles, so his goal was 175 Lexiles. Jillian was 350 Lexiles, and we wanted to increase that to 375 Lexiles. And Chloe was 580 Lexile, and we wanted to increase that to 605 Lexiles. So before we go any further, we're going to have a quick look at what is happening in the brain of a reader. There are many areas of the brain that are activated when reading a passage of text. The left hemisphere of the brain is the most essential for language and reading. As well, through the reading process, the neural networks start at the back of the brain, moving towards the front, and will loop as necessary. The reader can bring meaning to the text via two potential pathways in the brain, the dorsal pathway and the ventral pathway. The dorsal pathway, which is occipital to parietal to frontal, is used when the words are decoded phonetically and identifies the location or where the text is on the page. The ventral pathway, which is occipital to temporal, connects the spelling of the words to the semantics, as well as the neural pathway from the temporal lobe combining the orthography, semantics, and phonology. Once the reader makes sense of the letters first, then the words, and then finally the sentence, they then have to gather meaning from the entire paragraph. Your brain is highly activated when you are reading and as when you're trying to determine the meaning of what you've read, so the comprehension. These parts of the brain are the left hemisphere, like I said before, which is involved with factual comprehension, the right hemisphere, which is involved with deductive comprehension, the left posterior temporal lobe, which is responsible for receptive language, for understanding sentences, Wernicke's area, and this is known as the center of language comprehension. It's also involved with receptive language for understanding sentences. The left inferior temporal lobe and cingulate, which is involved with timing, as well as automatic naming for reading speed. The good old cerebellum, and this part of the brain is known as the little brain and has a role in timing, automatic naming for reading speed. Left Broca's area, where the motor programs for speech are found, as well as this area of the brain adds articulation, grammar, syntax, and sequencing for sentence structure. The left middle temporal lobe, which is associated with long-term memory of vocab and meaning. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and here this area of the brain plays a key role in working memory of the sentence content. And last but not least is the angular gyrus. This area is active when processing the semantics of a text. So to help actually students with reading comprehension, we determined that partner reading with paragraph shrinking would be a good way to improve students' reading comprehension. It was chosen because partner reading can be implemented class-wide. This is where strong readers are paired with weaker readers, and they take turns reading the same passage. And while one partner reads, the other partner will provide correction errors. Paragraph shrinking, which happens after each student has read, involves the students explaining the main idea of the passage in 10 or fewer words. And we liked the research behind partner reading, and it showed that partner reading improves reading fluency and comprehension in classrooms that had a high amount of struggling readers, and it was great with supporting English language learners. So the way that we determined the partners is based on the pre-test from Read Theory. So the readers were organized from strongest to weakest, and the top reader from the upper half was paired with the top reader from the lower half, and then so on. So frequency of and duration of the intervention. Overall, it took a total of 11 days, and that included 2 pre-training sessions that were 25 minutes each, as well as 9 intervention sessions, which were 15 minutes each. This occurred 3 times a week during the beginning of English language arts, and it went from beginning to end, a total of 3 weeks. So during the pre-training, those 2 days, students were trained on how to conduct partner reading. Ashley modeled the procedures for setup, how to read with a partner, and how to do error correction. And then she became the facilitator, and the students then worked in pairs for partner reading. During the actual implementation of the reading, of the partner reading, each session involved, at the beginning, Ashley reviewing the rules and procedures on how to correct errors, and how to paragraph shrink. So how to take what they've read and try and summarize it in 10 words or less. So when students were participating in partner reading, students again took turns reading the text, and then the text was selected at the weaker reader's level, and the stronger reader would actually start reading first, while the weaker reader provided error corrections. After 5 minutes, the partners switched, so it's just a short period of time, and Ashley was able to walk around and provide feedback and support as needed, as well as take in any formative assessment that she was looking for. So at the end of each partner read was those paragraph shrinks. So the students together summarized the main idea of what they read in 10 words or less. And they did this quite quickly, just under a couple of minutes. And they would go up as a pair to the teacher, Ashley, and count on their fingers the words that they used to summarize that body of text. It should also be noted that the texts that students selected were taken from Read Theory, and those paragraph shrinks included the who, what, and why of the passage, and this was collected as a formative assessment. So a quick discussion about fidelity. It was monitored by the teacher giving initial training to the students, walking around and monitoring students as they read, and provided corrections to their errors. She supported the pairs as needed and collected and reviewed those paragraph shrinks. And when I say collected and reviewed, she made notes in her book about those shrinks. So I mentioned that Read Theory was used to get the pre-assessment. It was also used as the post-assessment, and it was used to monitor the progress of the intervention. It's easy for teachers to set up accounts. They're actually free, and you can set up accounts for your students to go online and participate in the assessments. Just head to readtheory.org. And so for progress monitoring, we use this online assessment tool. It was an engaging way for students to be assessed. The tool itself actually assesses Lexile levels. Students are given a nonfiction passage of text and asks 5 to 8 questions related to what the students read. It also adjusts according to the reading level of the students. Teachers can generate reports that include a student's instructional and Lexile level. So this occurred 3 times a week for a total of 7 times. And the plan was to collect the data for the whole class as well as those 3 students that I was following to see if this intervention actually supported in improving the reading comprehension. So let's have a look at the effectiveness of this intervention. Looking at the whole class data, according to the initial baseline assessment that helped us identify that they were struggling with reading comprehension, students had a range of 400 to 1,175 Lexiles, but the most recent baseline assessment was 150 Lexiles to 1050 Lexiles. So that you can see based in the graph here. So the goal, again, was discussed to increase each Lexile level by 25 units. So for this particular intervention, we wanted to see the students go from 150 lexile to 175 lexile on the bottom end, and on the higher end of the reading levels from 1050 to 1075 lexile. So again, those goals and those reading level ranges were taken from the Action Potential Learning Guide. So the results were mixed. Our lowest level increased from our level increased from 150 lexiles to 340 lexiles. And then the highest level of lexile, which was 1050, decreased to 951 lexiles. So it was a little bit mixed, but looking more specifically at the three students, it was overall quite positive. So Chris was one of the students I was following, and just a little background about Chris: he has low processing speed and perhaps a learning disability. We're just waiting on testing for that. And the pretest showed him having a lexile level of 150, so he was one of the lowest students. And our goal was 175 lexiles. And based on the data here, Chris's lexile level increased to 362. So that's great news. Chloe, who, just a background about her, she struggles to ask for help. She was a little bit more consistent when it came to the data here. However, she started off at 580 lexile, and she actually increased to 610. And our goal was 605. So Chloe was right on track. And lastly is Jillian, and her initial test was 350 lexiles, and her goal was 375 lexiles, and she increased to 484 lexiles. So overall, this is great news. So the overall effectiveness of the intervention, it was successful for improving reading comprehension in our weaker students of the class and in the three students I followed. However, it seems as though it didn't support the stronger students in the class. So what worked for this intervention was that the length of time was perfect. It was short. It only took 15 minutes. And so those readers who might not necessarily enjoy reading, so they only had to read for 5 minutes while their partner corrected them. As well, it was a simple process to just set up and implement. The timing of the year was good for this particular intervention. Students really enjoyed group work, and so it kept them engaged, making be a crazy time for classes and for students. And so the timing was bang on, and it was really easy to solve problems that had arisen during the implementation. Some of these problems included days where the teacher wasn't able to be in class, and so they had a sub, and it was really simple to include into sub plans, and the students got right into the routine, so it made it quite easy that way. As well as if students weren't present during that day, it was easy to work around that and find readers to read with each other. And the tech issues, it was very minimal, so that also made it quite easy. What didn't work was that some students did struggle to stay on task. Another thing that didn't work was that it was time consuming to do the progress monitoring. And tied into that progress monitoring is the read theory accuracy. Because we initially had looked at reading comprehension issues based on the Fontes and Pinnell BAS, it's assessed a little bit differently than the read theory lexile levels. So there was some discrepancy there. The balance of the intervention and the progress monitoring, it seemed like there was always progress monitoring happening constantly. And it is related to the short amount of time that this was implemented. So I think having it spaced out a little bit more would be better. And at times, the teacher had to be paired with a student based on the numbers and the readers available. And so when this happened, it was hard for the teacher to actually facilitate and walk around. So if we could do it all over again, it would be nice to explain to the students the purpose of the intervention so they are aware of what's going on in their learning. We would allow for choice in the reading texts. This time around, just for simplicity, it was taken from readtheory.org, and so the students didn't necessarily have choices in the subject matter. Next time I would have those choices, and it might improve some engagement. I would spend more time in training the students in read theory and how to use it. Some students are very comfortable with using computers and other students struggle a bit. So just giving more pre-training on that and helping them feel more comfortable with it would be beneficial. And even though this was a short amount of time, it would have been nice to have changes in the partners. Instead of them always reading with the same person, it would be nice to have them read with other people as well. And this could be based on the progress monitoring and being responsive to the data. I would have progress monitoring happen right after partner reading, as I mentioned before. And when it came to that paragraph shrinking, the students came up and told the teacher exactly their 10 words or less. But I think if we had time, I would implement students sharing as a class to see how other students shrunk their paragraphs they're reading. So more on that reflection is how neuroscience impacted my approach to the implementation of this intervention and taking in all the information. I'm really happy that I actually took this neuroscience certificate program because it did make me more cognizant of the actual learning process and how better to support my students, as well as Ashley's students. And when I say my students, I mean my students across the district. My approach to this task involved me reflecting on how a student reads, specifically what parts of the brain are involved with learning to read. As a teacher, this is important because if we don't know how kids learn to read, we can't necessarily help improve their reading level. Something that does stick out for me is how executive functioning is key when it comes to supporting students who struggle. We no longer can say they just don't care. That's not really the case. It could be the fact that they struggle to maintain attention for various reasons, including the subject matter of the text, so the engagement they have, or the stress they feel because they may be a weaker reader. So when it came to this class, I considered ways to engage the students to get them excited about reading and engaged during the progress monitoring. As well, knowing more about the brain helps me to be more purposeful in the learning environment that we create or I create for my students. So what I learned through this process. My experience with implementing this intervention is a little bit different than the classroom teacher whom I worked with, so Ashley. At the heart of it, collaboration is key. As teachers, it's easy to feel like you're alone in your room with your 25, 30 students and all the pressures on you to help them. It shouldn't be the case. I was fortunate to work with Ashley and shout out to Lorna and Nicole in discussing the struggle that Ashley's students had and how we could help them. It wasn't just her students, it was our students. I learned that there are a lot of interventions out there to support our students, and they are generally easy to integrate into our teaching practice. A lot of them are brain-based. Partner reading is something that can be done at all grades and all subjects. Sometimes we get stuck doing what we've always done, and this process showed me that we should continually look at ways to support our students. As well, by monitoring the intervention, it adds another dimension to the reflection process that naturally happens in my teaching practice. At times, it's hard for teachers to say what they're doing is in their classroom is impacting the students. And this progress monitoring is a great way to see what is and what isn't working and responding to that. So thanks for taking the time to watch this, and I hope that maybe it gives you a little bit more insight into partner reading and maybe a way to implement it into your classroom practice.